Di Blasi. I'm the director of the Thomas International Center, and I'm very happy to have here with us today Patrick O'Connell. He's a physician and expert in internal medicine. He's been practicing medicine at the Duke Primary Care for several years, and now he's starting his own practice for reasons related to his faith, something we definitely want to hear about in this interview. He's also an expert in bioethics, and he accepted, and we are very grateful, to be one of our faculty members for some classes in bioethics, probably early next year. So Patrick, thank you for being with us today. To begin with, Patrick, tell us something about your professional story, how you became a doctor and what you've been doing, and how maybe you are switching now from one work to another, one job to another.
Yeah. So I've been in practice for 13 years since I finished training. I had gone to medical school at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. From there, at that point, I had figured out that I wanted to do adult primary care, so general internal medicine. So I went from there to the general internal medicine training track at Johns Hopkins Bayview Medical Center in Baltimore. So I was there for 3 years of training, stayed for a chief resident year, which is sort of like it's a 1 year, sort of a junior faculty type of position where you head the residents. And then from there, worked for a couple of years in the Baltimore area at a small community training program that was about 45 minutes north of Baltimore. That's where I met my wife, my now wife. So she and I met. She was in the DC area, I lived in Baltimore. And as we were courting, in discerning marriage, we also figured that coming back to North Carolina made sense because my family was here. Her brother already lived here. The plan was, for future grandparents were going to be retiring here, her parents. And so we came back to North Carolina, and so I've been here for 10 years now. I have worked for Duke Primary Care the entire 10-year stretch, so I've been with Duke now for a decade. Doing the general internal medicine, doing the primary care that I had wanted to and that I trained for. What has happened very recently is I've now have given my resignation at Duke for the spring of 2017, and I'm working on opening my own practice. So it's a process that's been in the works for about 1.5 years now that I've been first sort of praying and thinking about, and then figuring out the finances to see, is this even feasible? And then once I figured out that it was feasible, then doing all the 1,001 things required to actually get it up and running. So that's where I am now. So still a primary care doctor, but about to have a big change in where I'm a primary care doctor and the office. So.
Well, Patrick, what intrigued me about your decision, I was talking about you with another of our faculty members, one of your colleagues and friends, Jack Mistro, and I got really curious about this thing. I got this idea that you were changing job also because of something related to your faith. And this is very important to the Thomas International Center because one of our goals is definitely to work on the harmony between faith and our life in general. So sometimes in theoretical issues is finding a good harmony between your research field and your faith, the truth in which you believe. Otherwise we live as some kind of schizophrenia in our lives, right? And sometimes it's actually related to our work, and sometimes there are things we have to be consistent with. And so I got so curious that I was looking forward to hear you about this. So is it true? I mean, is this something related to your faith? Or
Absolutely.
Why?
So there's other components to why I'm making the change, but a big portion of it, I would say the dominant reason has to do, unfortunately, with the growing conflict between sort of a worldview, a secular view of what constitutes good medical care and what constitutes the right view of the person and the good of the person, and the conflict between that secular view and a Catholic view. For decades, generations, those two always aligned. And largely they still align, but there's increasing conflict. And so, just that fundamental notion, on the lips of my children to say, I want to help someone, that's an innate good desire that is echoed in everything in a Catholic understanding of medical care. But over the years and the decades, there have been areas of conflict, and the one that has been historically in recent history, sort of the most familiar to everyone, are areas of contraception and abortion. But what's happened in recent years is the number of areas of conflict have grown, the intensity of the conflict has grown, and future even greater conflicts are looming on the horizon. And essentially, I would say this, my own opinion, but it seems to me at the heart of it that the intellectual trend in the West anyway, I can't speak for other parts of the world, but at least in the West, has largely abandoned a Christian understanding of the person and of what is the good. And so it's much more driven by the whim of the societal norm of the day, and often guided by the technology that is made available to us, that if we can do it, this is probably good, and we should. And so what's happened then is it has made being a faithful Catholic in the world of medicine increasingly difficult. There have already been areas where it has been difficult. Our obstetrics and gynecology colleagues have been in the midst of this for decades. But now many other areas are being involved as well. And so from my standpoint, I could look down the road, not too many years, and envision a time when I would not be able to be employed in sort of a large healthcare system. And I thought, this is bad. And it's going to get worse. And I may become unemployable in the future, or I have to make compromises that I couldn't make. So that was a substantial part of my decision. I thought, I have to create something different. I have to provide an island, a life raft in which I and the people I take care of, and the people who would work in my practice, where they can be and not have to struggle with these issues and not have to be compromised. So that's been a very substantial part of my vision with this practice. It's not the only part, but it's the substantial core of it. So yes.
I wish you well. I mean, of course, I understand. I was thinking, I highly respect this, and I hope that you have some good advice for future students in medicine that you can share with us today. I also want to raise a doubt. I mean, the risk is that, as I see it, is that until they can, up to the point in which they can, Catholics will tend to isolate themselves from the institutions. And we may face a different law in the future that will force even individual physicians to provide some kind of assistance that would be immoral from our standpoint. So is there any hope that besides, in a sense, protecting ourselves right now, creating these little islands, is there any other things we can do to try to actually affect the system from the inside and avoid further?
That's a tough question. I don't have enough of the perspective of sort of the big picture of how to change society, how to influence societal trends. And I'm aware historically there are times when the work of collectively individual Christians, individual Catholics have changed society. And there are times in history when society has martyred the individual Catholics. I think that notion of planting the flag on the small piece of ground that you individually have control over is attractive and appealing. But and that's certainly a part of what I'm doing, but I also do it with the realization that just because I'm trying to be faithful to what I think God is leading me to, and because I'm trying to, plant this flag, it doesn't guarantee success. This is more of a revelation of my own character than of anything societal, but I'm a pessimist, sort of by nature, in terms of these kinds of questions. So I think things will get much worse before they ever get better. That's my own internal doom and gloom. But I would imagine it is my own grandchildren, I would hope, who would see a cultural rebirth. I don't think it will be me or my generation, and probably not even my children's generation. I mean, I see this large movement in a difficult direction, and so that doesn't mean a perspective of despair, but it's just the realization this is the we've been entering into it, but this is an entry point into a difficult time in Western history.
Well, we Catholics are usually long-term optimists.
Right, yes. Long-term optimists. Short-term pessimists, yes. But long-term, no question. No question.
And also we know that at the end of the day, we are going to face big troubles before the
right.
judgmental day.
Right, right.
So, by the way, going back to the first part of my question, what advice would you give to students today?
So what I would say to students is as part of your formation and training in medicine, or whatever your field may be, whether medicine or something else, is to understand that field through the Catholic vision of what that field touches on. In medicine, that means understanding the human person. It's interesting, in my own experience, I mean, I was raised Catholic, always faithful, and reasonably well formed. I mean, I remember my dad, who was very much an intellectual. He formed me well. I would say I had a substantially better than average upbringing in terms of understanding my faith. But I also recognized when I got to medical school and got further into it and then into residency training that I was I was mostly unequipped to understand the medical ethics that were particular to this professional arena as understood in the light of God and his love for the human person. And so what I ended up doing, this was after I had finished my training, I came across a year-long training seminar or training course in bioethics through the National Catholic Bioethics Center, which is just a tremendous group. And it was amazing to me by the end of it how much I had not known, how much I had not understood. And in many areas, I had just sort of passively absorbed the cultural norms, that in some circumstances, those norms were perfectly fine, and in other circumstances, they were not. So to make explicit that set of professional skills that I needed in medicine so that I could get it right, that was essential. And so for students, there's a variety of different opportunities and ways to do this. So the National Catholic Bioethics Center is just a tremendous resource. The Catholic Medical Association, which is a national organization for Catholic physicians, is a good, faithful organization, and they have I think they call it a weekend or week-long boot camp for medical students, and I guess for interested folks, maybe residents as well, that tries to give a quick introduction to all these different components in medicine. Or a person could just pick up a book and start reading. Of course, you got to find a good one. But something like the recently deceased William May and his book, Catholic Bioethics and the Gift of Human Life, is a very good resource. But making an explicit effort to learn, to form yourself in this arena, because even as a faithful Catholic, there's a lot of things that you just won't know. I mean, there's lots of systematic theology I don't know the first thing about, and I don't even know what I don't know because I've never explicitly studied it. But within medical ethics, this is what I need to know, and so by making that effort, it changed many. it may be much clearer in the way that I practice medicine and in decisions that I make, both individual patient decisions as we're trying to figure out what to do, and big decisions like I'm going to open my own practice, both the macro and micro level.
I'm just concerned that, hearing what people like you and Jack have to say about the short pessimistic, term, that some students might get scared and they might even change their majors, their subject area of study. They might not want to become doctors anymore. So I was sometimes we need more martyrs too, and it's good to give some hope about the possibility of finding some work, even though maybe it's tougher these days. So this is the kind of also advice I hope you would share with the students. So it's
well, and one of the things I would say along those lines is, if you have that understanding of what is it that I'm about, and what within the way that I'm going to practice medicine, what really is good for the people that I take care of. If you have a good understanding of that, then as situations arise, you can be clearer about how you're going to act, what you're going to do, what you cannot do. And sometimes that'll lead to difficulties. But through, as you go down this path and then get bumped out of it because of difficulties, then the path that you do end up going down it ends up being one that's much more faithful to God and to His will for you. I certainly had experiences of when I've interviewed for physician positions in the past, and back then when really only the main issue was contraception, and I would say I don't prescribe contraception, and that was the end of the interview. There were still the pleasantries, but essentially that was it. That was the end of it. Okay, that's fine, but that led to some difficulty, but it meant that when I then did have a job, okay, I've made this clear, I don't do this. This compromise, I wasn't pressured because I had made it clear from the beginning. So from that standpoint, if you have the formation, you know what these issues are, and you're willing to stand firm on them, then that will lead you to a place where you get to do what, at the end of the day, you can feel good about it. So
you're more fulfilled.
Yes,
Definitely.
yes.
So I understand that you specialized in some issues in bioethics. Which ones and why?
Yeah, so a handful of them. This largely came after I had finished the program through the National Catholic Bioethics Center. But there were a few areas that I had particular interest in. So one of them was some of the medical implications, or the medical implications that came from John Paul II's theology of the body. So by way of brief background, I had, when I was in, I think, my second year of training, and at a friend's house, I saw on the coffee table this book, The Theology of the Body, and I thought, oh, that looks interesting. And I had read some things from John Paul II previously, so I could wade through his dense writing. And I picked it up and started reading it, and it changed my life. In a nutshell, reading and praying through Theology of the Body helped me discover my own vocation to be married. And I would say then, as it came into medicine, gave me that vision of human sexuality, that way of understanding what our sexuality is about, that then allowed me to look at the medical topics and understand them in a much deeper way, in a much better way. And so one of the there's a combination of topics that I've spoken on. One of them being to give in incredibly concise form an overview of theology of the body, so that it then informs, for example, a talk that I've given on the medical technologies that can help in infertility, because some of those technologies are perfectly fine and are perfectly legitimate, and some are not. And so understanding, well, how do you make that distinction without this just being entirely arbitrary? You can ground it in an understanding of sexuality that's grounded in an understanding of theology of the body, and it just all makes sense. So that's one. A second area is issues having to do with how much care to accept, how much medical care do you need to accept in order to uphold your own dignity, the goodness of your own life, and what are the things that you can say, enough. How do you draw that line? How do you understand what you need to do and what you have the option to do? So in sort of the language of bioethics, ordinary versus extraordinary care, or proportionate versus disproportionate care. And these are the sorts of things that will often come up at the end of life. It doesn't have to be end of life, but that's often where it comes up. And so the Church has many very intelligent, very well thought out things to say on this. That's all under the umbrella of upholding human dignity. And the goodness of the life that God gives us. And so that's an area where I have given some talks and have tried to help people in understanding that. There's a couple of other smaller areas that I've spoken on, but those are the predominant areas.
And you have 4 kids too, talking about theology of the body.
Yeah, that's right. Well, they are all the fruit of John Paul II's writing and teaching. So. Yes.
We had a wonderful discussion the other day with one of our advisors, who is a good friend from Notre Dame. He's Dave O'Connor, and he teaches ancient philosophy. And we agree, both Dave and I, that a big problem of contemporary approach to sexuality is not to see children as part of sexuality. So the procreative, the unitive meaning, so-called, without the procreative meaning, actually doesn't make much sense. So it would be interesting, some psychologists, when they ask questions about sexual life, they could actually look at children, because they are sexual lives. They embody sexual life. So I guess that you learn a lot from your own experience when you teach about theology of the body. So, well, Patrick, thank you very much for coming to this interview, and we are looking forward to listening to your classes soon in our program, probably early next year.
Great. It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much.